So you've got to present some data to your team, to a colleague, to your boss, and it's not great. So maybe it's a bit disappointing. You put all this time and effort into something, or you spent a lot of money on a particular pursuit and it hasn't kind of worked out how you thought. Or maybe it's just, you're worried about accountability, you're worried about how it's going to reflect on you. One option, I guess, is you could put your head in the sand and you could completely ignore the fact that the data is not what you had hoped it would be. Or you can lean into the discomfort, as Brené Brown says, and actually share the data. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips for how to do that and things to remember. If you have to share some of that stuff that's maybe uncomfortable, awkward, disappointing, it's not telling the story that you would like it to be telling. The first thing is that you absolutely need to name the discomfort early. Don't faff about with the positives and look at how much growth in this area we've had. It's going to feel fluffy to the audience. It's going to feel like you're not actually getting to your point, and they're going to know that something is coming. And, it's like being asked to come and have a meeting with your boss and you're petrified that things are going to be bad. You walk in and they start giving you compliments and you actually don't take any of that in because you're expecting to get in trouble for something, or you think that this is about something negative. So you're not going to take in the good stuff. So let's not do pat, slap, pat, or, the positive feedback sandwich, which we've all heard about before, where we start with the positive, talk about the negatives, and then finish with the positive at the end. We're not doing that with data. We're walking in and we're saying, hey team, look, I need to talk to you about this really it's disappointing data, but I really want to have a conversation about it and work out what we do next. Boom. First sentence. You need to name the discomfort up front. You need to say, look, this is going to be uncomfortable. It's pretty awkward. Look, these results are not what we expected, not what we'd hoped, but we don't want to bury our head in the sand. We actually want to tackle this head on, and we want to talk about what this could mean for us. And that's going to create a space of psychological safety. It's going to engage people straight away and have them understanding and knowing your intentions. And hopefully it means that you're starting on the right foot, and it's going to be a really fruitful, hopefully, fingers crossed, conversation. The second thing that we want to do is separate the result and the outcome from the decision itself. So assuming that you had used really good evidence to make the decision, you had brainstormed all the ideas of what you could possibly do, all of the actions, and this was a really considered choice that you made. That's actually great. We need to focus on the decision making that was powerful and positive, and less on the result or the outcome. Amy Edmondson, in her book, The Right Kind of Wrong, talks about it and calls it intelligent failure when we have a really, measured, calculated, deliberate decision and we take action, but it doesn't work. We actually want to be celebrating that almost failure, but that we're celebrating the decision making. It's actually okay. Like what we're trying to do when we use data and define or decide what actions we're going to take as a result of the trends and insights is we're all predicting. We are predicting what we think is likely to work in our team, with our people, in our context. So if it doesn't work, let's not put pressure on people and let's not treat people poorly when all we've asked for them to do is predict what's likely to work. If you've had collaborative team conversations about actions, you've consulted a lot of different stakeholders, you've had all of these people contribute to the decision making, that if it hasn't worked the way you'd hoped, it is intelligent failure. So we want to really separate the result, focus on the positives around the decision making. It's not to say that it's not perfect and we won't want to come up with ways that we can refine it and tweak it and take steps forward. But we've got to focus on the amount of work and effort we put into the decision making in the first place, and focus on the fact that it was prediction rather than, it's never as straightforward as saying, we want this particular thing. We'll tweak this little bit in the middle and then we'll magically, our inputs will then create these beautifully different outcomes. It doesn't work like that. Humans don't work like that. Our organizations don't work like that. The next one is that we really need to make sure that we are shifting, and the conversation needs to be framed in one of psychological safety, obviously. If we don't have psychological safety in this conversation, we're not going to get very far. So as well as kind of naming up front the discomfort that they're going to feel, you also need to really explicitly say that this is an opportunity for learning. There's no judgment that's taking place in this conversation. This is about learning. And if you've done the considered thinking and decision making as a team collaboratively prior to the action and the action hasn't worked, remove the emotion from it. That's actually great data back to you, great feedback that actually that's not the way forward, or that's actually not working yet for you. So take on the awkward, uncomfortable, disappointing data as actually a point of learning and observation and reflection, and frame the whole conversation more positively as what can we learn from this? How does this shape what we do next? How does this tweak that decision making, or what do we do? You're going to get people on board. You're going to get people who are in that conversation happy to speak up, happy to contribute their thoughts, happy to share kind of what their experience has been, rather than if you go in leading with judgment, you're absolutely going to isolate people and they're going to close up and they're just going to go, I'm not engaging with this. So that's obviously not what we want. So we really want to be focusing on the learning opportunity rather than judgment, and name it. Don't assume they know that. You have to name it. The final one is that we want to end with a question. We want to end with, like with our regular data storytelling, it's what do we do next? We've got to end this conversation with a what do we do next? It's not a judgment or a defensive conclusion, or like this is where we're at, and we're not telling what has to happen next. We ideally want then a dialogue where people are having a conversation, and then there's a next step and curiosity and question about how do we use this new learning and this new data, if we're able to remove ourselves from it, how do we actually use that now as more evidence, and so what? And the conversation is then about curiosity and next steps. And as I said in the last point, learning, you're far more likely to get people engaged in the process. You think about the flip of that. And I've sat in meetings like this. I'm sure many of you have sat in meetings like this where data's presented, it's negative, your leader rips you one, nobody says anything, there's no collaboration, there's no dialogue. And you're told what to do, and you may or may not agree. You won't buy into it because you kind of don't really see the point of it. That's what we're trying to not do that really actively. So those couple of tips there, hopefully will help you present some of that awkward, icky, disappointing data back to team members. At the end of the day, when we go into these conversations, we've got to remember that the people we work with are usually inherently trying to do their best. And so when we come in with judgment or, blame or a closed mindset, we're not going to bring the best out of people. And it's not really celebrating or recognizing the fact that these people probably worked really hard on that thing and it didn't work. And they're going to be just as disappointed or annoyed as you are. But it is about what is the next step and what do we do? How do we take it from here?